Dark Psychology at Work: How Bosses and Colleagues Manipulate You. Introduction. Have you ever felt like something was wrong at work but you couldn't quite put your finger on it? Maybe your boss gave you a compliment but it somehow made you feel small. Or a colleague forgot to include you in an important meeting and later acted like it was no big deal. These aren't accidents. In many workplaces, manipulation is not just common, it's a survival tactic. This video will reveal how dark psychology operates in professional environments. We will break down the hidden tactics bosses and colleagues use to control, pressure, and exploit others. By the end, you will not only recognize these methods but also know how to protect yourself. Welcome to the world of dark psychology at work. Chapter 1: The Atmosphere of Control. Workplaces often look professional on the surface, people smiling, meetings running, emails flying back and forth. But beneath this polished exterior there can be a silent game of power and control. In most organizations, a subtle hierarchy is always at play. Managers seek authority, employees want recognition, and colleagues compete for promotions. This environment becomes fertile ground for manipulation. A toxic workplace doesn't always scream toxicity, instead it whispers. It hides behind professional culture or company values. The control starts small: a strict deadline, a sudden rule, or a joke that feels more like a dig. The main tools of this atmosphere are fear, uncertainty, and dependency. Fear of losing your job. Uncertainty about how your performance is judged. Dependency on your boss's approval for raises, promotions, or even job security. Psychologists call this a power imbalance. The higher the imbalance, the easier it is for manipulation to thrive. Employees often stay silent, believing that speaking up will cost them their career. For example, imagine a manager who constantly reminds the team of how many people are waiting in line to take their jobs. This creates insecurity, making employees easier to control. Or consider a team culture where everyone is told they are a family. While this sounds positive, it can be used to guilt people into unpaid overtime or constant availability. This atmosphere of control is not accidental. It is carefully maintained to keep employees compliant and hesitant to rebel. Once this environment is set, the manipulative tactics can begin. Chapter 2: Manipulation Tactics Used by Bosses. While some leaders inspire and support their teams, others use the darker side of psychology to control, intimidate, and extract maximum effort with minimum resistance. These manipulative bosses rarely shout or make direct threats. Instead, they use subtle techniques that slowly wear employees down. Let's explore some of the most common tactics. 1. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation in the workplace. A manipulative boss will distort reality to make employees doubt themselves. They might deny giving instructions that they clearly gave before. They may criticize you for not meeting a deadline, even if the timeline was impossible. Or they may subtly suggest that you're too sensitive when you point out their unfair behavior. Over time, this makes the employee question their own memory, judgment, and even sanity. A gaslit employee becomes easier to control because they start believing that the problem is always themselves, never the boss. 2. Fear of replacement. A classic manipulation tactic is constantly reminding workers how replaceable they are. Phrases like, "There are hundreds of people who would love to have your job. If you can't handle it, someone else will." This creates an ongoing sense of fear. Employees stop negotiating for fair treatment because they're afraid of being discarded at any moment. Fear makes them compliant. 3. Love bombing then withdrawal. This technique starts with extreme positivity. The boss praises you, gives you recognition, maybe even small perks, but once you're hooked on that approval, they suddenly withdraw it. The result? You start chasing their validation. Instead of working for yourself or the team, you're working for the next compliment. This keeps employees in a cycle of dependency, craving approval, fearing rejection. 4. Moving the goalposts. A manipulative boss often changes expectations at the last moment. For example, you meet all your targets, but then the definition of success suddenly shifts. Yes, you reached the sales goal, but the real challenge was customer retention. Sure, the project is done, but now I need a completely new presentation by tomorrow. This tactic keeps employees in a state of exhaustion because no matter how hard they work, they never truly win. The boss remains in control, always raising the bar just out of reach. 5. Divide and conquer. Toxic leaders often prevent their employees from uniting by creating tension within the team. They might give contradictory instructions to different workers, then sit back while arguments erupt. They may gossip, play favorites, or promote unnecessary competition. This ensures that the employees don't unite against the boss. Instead, they waste energy fighting each other, leaving the leader firmly in power. 6. Emotional blackmail. Finally, there's guilt and shame. Bosses may say things like, "I thought you were loyal. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me." By framing obedience as a moral obligation, they force employees to comply out of guilt rather than logic. A manipulative boss rarely uses just one of these tactics. They combine them, shifting from kindness to cruelty, from praise to punishment. Over time, this creates an unpredictable and unstable environment, which is exactly the point. If you never know what to expect, you remain off balance and easy to control. Chapter 3. Manipulation between colleagues. Manipulation in the workplace doesn't only come from bosses. Colleagues who are supposed to be teammates can also become powerful manipulators. Their methods are often more subtle because they operate on the same level of hierarchy. But make no mistake, peer-to-peer manipulation can be just as destructive, if not worse. Let's break down some of the most common tactics. 1. Sabotage. Some colleagues deliberately undermine others to make themselves look better. They forget to forward an important email. They accidentally misplace files or delay information. They may give you wrong instructions and then blame you for the mistake. Sabotage is effective because it damages your credibility while making the manipulator look more competent by comparison. 2. Credit theft. One of the most common workplace frustrations is when someone takes credit for your hard work. A colleague might sit quietly while you present your idea, then later repeat it to the boss as if it were their own. Or they might downplay your contribution to a group project, presenting themselves as the main driver of success. This type of manipulation erodes trust and creates resentment, but often goes unpunished because it's hard to prove. 3. The victim role. Some manipulators thrive by constantly playing the victim. They complain about being overwhelmed, claim they're being unfairly treated, or exaggerate their struggles. Why? Because if they convince others to pity them, they can avoid responsibility. They might get lighter workloads, extra sympathy from management, or even use their struggles as an excuse when they fail. Meanwhile, others pick up the slack. 4. The gossip weapon. Office gossip isn't just idle chatter, it can be a weapon. Manipulative colleagues spread rumors to damage reputations, divide teams, or build alliances. For example, "Did you hear that John is thinking of quitting? I don't think Sarah is loyal to the team." These whispers create doubt and suspicion, isolating the target and boosting the manipulator's own social power. 5. Silent treatment and exclusion. Sometimes, the most powerful manipulation comes not from words but from silence. Colleagues may deliberately exclude you from conversations, meetings, or social events. They may give you the silent treatment, pretending you don't exist. The goal is to isolate you socially, making you feel unwanted and insecure. Isolation reduces your confidence and weakens your position in the team. 6. Emotional drainers. Some coworkers constantly seek emotional support without giving anything in return. They offload their stress, frustrations, or personal issues onto you, leaving you drained and distracted from your own work. This may not seem like manipulation at first, but over time it becomes a form of control. You become the emotional caretaker while they focus on their career advancement. 7. Backhanded help. Another subtle trick is pretending to help while actually setting you up for failure. For example, a colleague might volunteer to assist you on a project, only to deliver poor work that drags you down. When things go wrong, they can blame you, saying, "I was only trying to help." Manipulative colleagues thrive in environments where competition is high and trust is low. They exploit weaknesses, rivalries, and insecurities to climb the ladder, often at the expense of those around them. Chapter 4. Psychological traps employees fall into. Manipulation at work doesn't succeed only because bosses or colleagues are clever. It works because employees often fall into psychological traps, invisible mental patterns that make them easier to exploit. These traps can affect anyone, even intelligent and experienced professionals. Let's examine the most common ones. 1. The need for approval. Many employees crave recognition and validation. When someone constantly needs to be told they're doing a good job, they become vulnerable. A manipulative boss or colleague can use this need like a leash. A single compliment motivates you to work harder. A small withdrawal of praise makes you feel anxious. Over time, you become addicted to their approval. This dependency makes it easy for manipulators to push employees beyond their limits without open resistance. 2. The fear of conflict. Workplaces often reward team players who avoid drama, but this fear of conflict can be exploited. Manipulators know that many people would rather stay silent than confront an issue. For example, if a colleague steals credit for your work, you might stay quiet to keep the peace. But silence only encourages the manipulator to repeat the behavior. Fear of conflict keeps employees trapped in cycles of abuse. 3. The guilt trap. Humans are social beings, and guilt is one of the strongest emotional levers. If you don't work overtime, the whole team will suffer. If you say no, you're letting us all down. Manipulators use guilt to force compliance. Employees who want to be seen as good or responsible often give in, sacrificing their own well-being. 4. The overachiever's curse. Some employees have a perfectionist mindset. They want to excel, impress, and be the best. At first, this looks like a strength, but manipulators know how to exploit it. By continuously raising expectations, they push overachievers into exhaustion. Since the overachiever ties their self-worth to performance, they accept impossible tasks without protest. In other words, their ambition becomes their prison. 5. The family illusion. Many companies call themselves a family. While this sounds warm, it often becomes a trap. In a real family, you sacrifice for each other out of love, but in a company, family language can be used to blur boundaries. Working unpaid overtime because we're family. Covering for mistakes because family sticks together. This illusion tricks employees into accepting unfair conditions that they would reject in any other context. 6. The fear of uncertainty. One of the strongest human fears is the unknown. Manipulators exploit this by keeping employees in constant uncertainty about their future. Maybe we'll promote you next quarter, let's see. We'll decide about your raise later, keep proving yourself. This dangling promise keeps employees chasing opportunities that may never come. The fear of leaving without guarantees keeps them tied to the manipulator's control. 7. The lone wolf syndrome. Finally, many employees believe they must handle everything alone. They don't ask for help or share their struggles because they see vulnerability as weakness. Manipulators exploit this isolation. A lone wolf has no allies, no support system, and no one to confirm that something unfair is happening. Alone, they are much easier to control. These psychological traps don't mean employees are weak, they mean they're human. But awareness is the first step. Once you recognize these patterns, you can break free from them and resist manipulation. Chapter 5: How to Recognize and Defend Against Manipulation. Awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing about dark psychology is only the first step. To truly protect yourself at work, you need strategies, practical tools that help you recognize manipulation and defend against it. Let's break them down. 1. Spot the red flags early. Manipulation is most dangerous when it goes unnoticed. Train yourself to recognize the warning signs. If someone constantly makes you doubt your memory, it could be gaslighting. If your workload grows but recognition disappears, you may be caught in goalpost shifting. If praise feels like a reward for obedience rather than performance, you might be dealing with emotional control. The faster you identify manipulation, the harder it becomes for others to trap you in it. 2. Document everything. One of the strongest defenses is simply keeping records. Save emails and messages. Write down dates, conversations, and deadlines. Keep evidence of your contributions. When manipulative bosses or colleagues try to twist the story, documentation protects you. It turns your word against theirs into solid proof. 3. Strengthen your boundaries. Manipulators thrive on blurred boundaries. They push until you give in. That's why setting and enforcing boundaries is critical. Examples: politely but firmly saying, "I won't be able to stay late today." Redirecting guilt trips: "I understand the pressure, but I have to balance my responsibilities." Refusing to take on tasks outside your role without proper recognition. Boundaries are not rude, they are a form of self-respect. 4. Detach emotionally. Manipulators want to trigger your emotions. Fear, guilt, anger, these are the tools they use to control you. By staying calm and detached, you weaken their power. When confronted with a manipulative comment, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, what outcome are they trying to provoke? Once you see the game, you can choose not to play it. 5. Build alliances. Isolation is a manipulator's best friend. That's why one of the strongest defenses is building connections with trustworthy colleagues. When you have allies, it's harder for manipulators to spread lies. You have witnesses to confirm your version of events. You gain emotional support that makes you more resilient. Even one trusted ally at work can make a huge difference. 6. Assertive communication. There's a big difference between aggression and assertiveness. Aggression escalates conflict, but assertiveness sets clear expectations with confidence. For example, instead of saying, "You're always blaming me unfairly," try, "I want to clarify what was agreed upon so there's no misunderstanding." Instead of silent resentment, state calmly, "I need recognition for my contribution to this project." Assertive communication takes practice, but it creates respect without fueling drama. 7. Know when to escalate. Sometimes no amount of self-defense works. In those cases, escalation is necessary. This could mean reporting repeated abuse to HR, bringing up issues during performance reviews, or in extreme cases, seeking legal advice. Escalation should never be your first move, but it must remain an option. Manipulators count on your silence. Breaking that silence changes the game. 8. Protect your mental health. The most important defense is caring for yourself outside of work. Exercise, rest, hobbies, and supportive relationships act as a shield against stress. When you are emotionally strong, manipulation has less impact, but when you're exhausted and burnt out, even small tricks can break you down. Manipulation thrives on ignorance and silence. But with awareness, documentation, boundaries, and resilience, you can create a shield that even the most skilled manipulator will struggle to break. Chapter 6. Conclusion. Work is supposed to be a place of growth, collaboration, and achievement. But for many people, it becomes a battlefield of hidden power games. Dark psychology at work is not always loud or obvious. It whispers through subtle lies, distorted truths, silent exclusions, and invisible pressures. Bosses may manipulate with fear, shifting goals, or conditional praise. Colleagues may sabotage, gossip, or drain your energy. And sometimes, the biggest enemy is not them, it's the psychological traps inside us. The need for approval, the fear of conflict, the illusion of family. But here, the truth: once you see the game, it loses its power. Manipulation thrives in the dark, but awareness brings light. When you document, set boundaries, stay calm, and build alliances, you make yourself harder to control. When you protect your mental health and refuse to play by unfair rules, you regain your freedom. The workplace will always have power dynamics, that's inevitable, but you don't have to be a victim of them. You can be aware, resilient, and prepared. So the next time you sense something off at work, pause, ask yourself, is this real or am I being manipulated? That single question can change everything. And remember, true professionalism is not about blind obedience. It's about clarity, respect, and balance. Protect your mind, and no manipulator can take control of it.